Let's take us through. We heard Jim Cramer's comments early on the show. He made those comments last night that Apple is not a stock you trade. You just own it. You buy it, even just buy an index fund. How is Apple going to fare now that we know President Trump and Tim Cook are seemingly on better ground again?
I think that that is important. I think that a lot of what we saw was an answer to the question of, will Tim go and bend the knee? And he did. He showed up with a lot of gold, and that is a great way to get in this president's good graces. And so, I think that the sort of behavioral piece of it is more important in some ways than the actual commitment, which is relatively de minimis and just sort of a vague extension of what they have already been doing and what they've already committed across the last two administrations.
What exactly is the, I guess, fundamental story behind whether or not Apple can actually make the turnaround? The politics are important. We know the optics are important. The operating environment that they're in physically here in the U.S. and around the world is important. But what exactly has to happen with Apple's actual business, its products, for investors to really take notice again?
Well, I think one, you need to sell more devices. This is still a hardware business at its core. You need to sell more devices. We're not seeing a lot of sort of refresh in terms of newness in the product that makes you say, I need that new product. And so you're on kind of a normal refresh cycle. And that is one of the many reasons that we're not going to see these phones manufactured in the US, because the prices would skyrocket and you would see even fewer device sales. And so I think this, at the end of the day, you can talk about AI, you can talk about politics. The question is, how many people are walking into an iPhone store, an Apple store, and buying a new laptop or buying a new iPhone? And that number just hasn't been sky high over the last few years.
Well, over the last few years plus, there's been an immense amount of focus for Apple, especially in the last, say, 5 to 7 years, over the product mix or the revenue mix within the company. There's been a lot more focus on the growing side of things with the App Store and services side of the business, as opposed to the really, really big revenue profile for iPhones specifically. How do you see that mix evolving over time, and will that help mitigate some of the issues around tariffs and trade uncertainty?
I mean, services has been a giant win for them in terms of revenue mix. But the thing you have to remember is that in services, it's not just sort of your Apple TV Plus subscriptions. It's also the App Store take. And there has been more and more pushback, especially globally, against that App Store take, with developers saying this isn't fair. People should be able to just buy, from us separately when it's not an in-app purchase like a game or a dating app. And so I do think that long term, that piece of the business is probably going to be flat to down, and it probably won't necessarily go up a ton. And so that is not, in my mind, sort of where you can really hang your hat. And again, if you're not buying the hardware, you're not spending money on the services. And so, I think that when a couple years ago, AirPods were the big story, that sort of tells you that the device refreshes are just not doing what they would like them to do.
And Sarah, before we let you go, in your eyes, which of those so-called Magnificent Seven stocks has the most upside potential, given where they are right now and where you see them going?
I'm a Google girl. I think that Alphabet is very well poised to win in AI across cloud. We use those products a lot, and they're a little bit more politically inoculated. Even if they spun out Chrome, I actually think in the long term, more spin outs could be a good thing. I think Waymo is a huge and growing business, so I would definitely say Alphabet.